He's in a production starring as Prince. And so the wig was glued to his head, and he said, I'll have it off next week, I promise. But anyways, we're all kind of like, oh, nice. Kind of want to take that in too. All right. A colleague of mine tells me the story of about a woman in his church, we'll call her Lauren, who was a solid church member, had a good job in the community, was a person of influence. And so when she stopped coming to church at this church where she'd been attending for over a decade and started going to another church, everybody people wondered why. She'd always been kind of an easygoing sort. But they had noticed that increasingly over the last months, her words and her attitude took on a different tone, perhaps we should say. And whereas she used to be a really good listener, she had become more of a talker, and where at one time she had questions, now she had answers. Well, and then her daughter, we'll call her Mallory. Mallory went along with her adult daughter to this new adventure, this brand new faith, new church, new situation. It was all new and is exciting. Mallory learned some things and heard some things she had never heard before in her life. It was all going very well. They were having a good experience until one day, Mom, Lauren, sort of went off on her daughter, Mallory, and was talking to her about the tattoo Mallory's boyfriend had on her arm, how she didn't like that. Well, Mallory shot back a couple of words of her own. It was a sharp back and forth between the two that ended with Mallory storming out of the house, not to return for several days. So my friend tells me, he said, well, it took them a few days, but eventually the two women got back together and realized that they had overreacted and said too much, and that maybe even more than that they had kind of strayed from their faith, that had served them so well for so long. Have you ever lost the real you? You know, a season of life when maybe you behaved in a way that was unbecoming of you, or a time when you weren't yourself, a time that maybe in these later days you're now a bit ashamed of, but they are what they are. Or maybe you're still feeling kind of lost from the real you. Or have you been there and returned? Good news, my friends, good news for all of you, all of us. There is always grace. God forgives and invites us to new life, and that offer is always available now, no matter who you are or what you or I have done. So in our scripture reading this morning, Kyle, thank you for reading for us. Jesus gives us that mind-bending thought that those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who would lose their life would in fact find it. Then Jesus says, "For what will it profit you to gain the whole world and forfeit your life?" Or as it says in the Message Bible, that more contemporary version of the Bible, what good would it do to get everything you want and lose you? The real you. So I ask you, and this is our note to self for today, is it time to find your real self? Or maybe better said, or to find your real self again? Is it time to upgrade yourself, to be someone who invests his or her life and energy and resources beyond, outside of him or herself? So I'll go ahead and give you the punchline too. That was the note to self, and here's what I'm asking us to do: is to to spend your life rather than save it, to give your life, to invest your life. The real you. So in these Sundays around, we're in the Gospel of Mark. Mark was was the earliest of the gospel writers in putting together his gospel. It was in the time between 60 and 70 AD. And we have to keep in mind the context of that day. And in that day, among Christians, the situation, it was rough. It was a harsh existence for them. There was much suffering. There was much persecution. And so to hear these words, to save your life, but to lose it, we hear that theme in Jesus' words throughout Mark's gospel. So for us, these words, to lose our lives rather than to save it, these words are figurative. They're something for us to consider, to think about. But to the people hearing these words back in Jesus' day, these words would have been taken literally because death was all around them. Young and old, death was everywhere, all around them. So we're going to do some history here today. We'll jump in with it. Perhaps you remember that the Emperor Constantine in the year 311 AD made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. But prior to that, Christians had suffered harsh persecution through the ups and downs of those 300 years between the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and the coming forward of Constantine. The emperor who reigned before Constantine was a man named Decius. Decius was a serious guy who sought to unify the empire under one faith system, not Christianity, but just that of the Roman gods. Perhaps you studied those over and over again in school, as I seem to. And he made a decree that everyone would make sacrifices to his gods, to these gods. And if you failed to do that, you would be subject to arrest, torture, death, the whole 9 yards, whatever it may be. This guy was serious about this. So as you can imagine, this was a problem within the Christian community. Those Christians who went along with the emperor, who just did what he said to save their lives, were essentially recanting their faith. We're swearing allegiance to the emperor's gods and leaving behind our Christian God. Those people were labeled the lapsed, all right? L-A-P-S-E-D, the lapsed. Okay, so a little crowd participation here to draw you in a bit. Those of you who are having a birthday this month, let me see your hands. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you do anything. All right, okay, good. Quite a few Septembers. Well, great. Congratulations. I'm calling you today. You get to be the confessors. All right? The confessors are those who refuse to make these sacrifices to the Roman God, refuse to recant and walk away from their Christian God. And it was a beautiful act of faith, but they had a rough go of it because it wasn't popular with the emperor. Many confessors were killed, others were tortured, some were maimed, and some, as I see here today, some of you survived to tell your tale. So there were confessors on one hand, and then there were the lapsed. And as you can imagine over here in this category, there's all kinds of different levels or degrees to which people lapsed and let go. So let me see the hands of those of you born in October, November, and December. Anybody? Come on, again, I'm not going to... Oh, yeah, there we go. Good. Sorry, you represent those who completely blew it. I mean, you just lapsed Right, I mean, the first sign of any pressure, any of that, you're done, that's it, I'm out, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And they went without a fight. So sorry, you can't hide. You get an F for effort, by the way. But that's it. Okay, how about January, February, March? Where are you? Okay, good, good. You represent those who held out for a while. You gave it an effort before giving in, and so we'll give you a C for effort. April, May, and June, I'm one of those. Anybody? Okay, a few more of those. We're moving up the scale here. We held out until our death was imminent. We weren't going to give in, and they finally said, okay, Christian, this is your last chance. And you looked at your spouse and your family and said, okay, I give. And you make the stupid sacrifices. So we'll get a B for effort, maybe, all right? How about July? Anybody July? A couple of those? Good, all right. Good, you lapsed in just a weak moment, but then immediately turned and reaffirmed your faith and put up with the torture or whatever it may be. Ouch. I'll give you an A for effort on that. Well done. How about August? Any August? Oh yeah, a couple of Augusts. You all bought your way out by bribing the officials. To give you a certificate of sacrifice saying that, in fact, you did do the required sacrifices for the emperor, even though you did not. Well played, August. Well done, all right? So after the death of Emperor Decius, the persecution subsided. And you see where this is headed, right? So then all of us, other than the September group, we all want back in the faith, the church, the movement. And that's the question. Should we be let back in? Talk about a long elders meeting, right? So what do you think, September? What do you think? Should we let everybody back in? I mean, you went through a literal hell and somehow survived all of that to keep your faith, and that everybody else, I wouldn't say we all took the easy way out, but an easier way than you. So are you going to let us back in? And if so, are there conditions to our coming back in? Penance? Do we have to be rebaptized? Is there a cost to it? We have to pay, give a bunch of money? Well, in history, it tells us good news. Our September friends, the confessors, did indeed let us all back in, all of us amongst the lapsed, but not without sufficient shaming and penance. So thanks, September. That was big of you, right? Then Jesus says, for what will it profit you to gain the whole world and forfeit your life? 1,000 years ago, the Catholic Church was a powerful entity, even much more so than today. And around the world today, we can find monasteries in some of the most amazing places, geographical wonders, because as I understand it, in those days, when the Catholic Church, someone there found a place they liked, they said, we'll take it. And they'd build a monastery there or something along the lines. Next month, there's a group of 32 of us who are headed, some of which are from First Christian Church Tyler, others from disciples' churches around. We're all headed to Greece, where we will visit some of the most extraordinary places on the earth. Take this monastery, for instance. Do we have that picture available? Coming up. All right, we'll get there in just a second. In several of those places we'll visit are monasteries, like this one on top of a 900-foot rock column. It's one of 7 or 8 in the area. Do we have that picture? Maybe, maybe not. There it is, sure enough. A 900-foot rock column just sticking up out of the earth. And there are several of them around, and on top of each one of them is a monastery. How in the world they got up there in those days, I don't know, but they did. It gives a whole new meaning to the term inspiration point, doesn't it? I think so. Wouldn't it be wonderful up there? Just, wow, just alone with God, away from all the hustle and bustle, the view. You could see the sunrise on the east, the sunset on the west. The stars at night are big and, well, you know, they're too. It would be wonderful. And yet there's something about the whole setup that seems a little bit off, that these deeply faithful people have dedicated their lives to be as close to God as possible. As close to God as possible. And they have done that by positioning themselves apart from everyone else. So that seems a little bit self-serving, right? So to their credit, the nuns and the monks who live up top of these rock pillars, they've taken it upon themselves to begin a program of feeding the under-resourced people in nearby towns. Which is good, so then they won't be accused of being so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good, right? That may be the only time they would be seen coming down from on high, but they would come down and help feed the people, a beautiful thing. So in the late 4th century, just within the 100 years that followed Constantine making Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, there's a monk named Telemachus, the old man in the picture there, who was determined to leave the world and to live all alone in prayer with God out in the desert. And so he did just that. He lived out for a while and spent all of his time in prayer. But then one day he arose from his prayer realizing that this brand of faith of his was not selfless, but rather selfish. And so he realized that in order to serve God, he had to serve others, the people all around, which he could not do in the desert, which would not be easy to do from atop of a rock pillar mountain. So Telemachus traveled back to Rome, which was again now officially Christian. So no longer were Christians being fed to the lions. This was the entertainment of the day. You go down to the Colosseum and watch all of this. This is kind of what the people loved, I guess. They're no longer being fed to the lions or tortured as confessors. But to backfill all that and the need for entertainment, there were gladiators who were, slaves taken in, whatever, and they were there to fight to the death for the entertainment of the masses of people, many of whom were Christian people. "Hail Caesar, we who are about to die salute you," they would say. So Telemachus, this monk, was appalled by this. He's thinking men for whom Christ had died were killing each other to amuse the crowds of people, many of whom were Christian people. And so he attended one of these fights one day. And in the midst of a battle, he jumps over the barrier and runs out into the arena and stands between the gladiators, who stop for a moment, taken back, like, what are we supposed to do here? Who is this man? What is he doing? So the crowds jeered and yelled and everything, and so the gladiators just pushed the old man out of the way and went back to their fighting. But Telemachus would not be kept down. He was right back up, standing between them again, not allowing the fighting to occur. And the crowd went crazy and they shouted, "Away with him, away with him." So one of the gladiators, for whom life and death was an everyday thing, just ran him through with a sword. And Telemachus, the monk, fell to the dirt floor in the arena and died. And the historians write about that moment, that this quiet came over the arena. Thousands of people, shocked somehow that this holy man would give his life in that way. And there was a quiet, and everything and everyone stopped. And then in a moment, which I would say, then the Spirit of God came upon that whole arena as one, and their eyes were opened as to what was really going on there. And in that moment was the end of all the gladiator fighting. And it never has returned. By dying, Telemachus had ended these games, the killing, the carnage, the amusement. An author wrote, by losing his life, he had done more than he could ever have done living out in the desert. Jesus says, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. The disciples had participated in Jesus' ministry of preaching and healing. And in this passage which we read today, they're getting the idea, they're starting to understand that they are going to join him in his suffering too. So today we don't have to be all that creative to join Jesus in this. There are many ways. There are many ways we are called to deny ourselves in order to be more like Christ. Well, like what, you might say? Well, C.S. Lewis had an interesting thing to say on the topic, and he said, think of these opportunities more like quarters. Like quarters, more than, say, $100 bills. Things that we do little by little, over and over again. Maybe it's to refuse to take something personally, to be quick to forgive when it's ours to give. Maybe it's to hold our tongue. It's never easy, but most always worthwhile. Or to let go of control, or to give a little more than we had intended to give, or maybe to stop and listen to someone to whom we would regularly not give the time of day. For what will it profit you to gain the whole world and forfeit your life? If you think about it, there are some things in life which are lost by being kept safe. Some things that are saved by being used, by being risked, by being put out there. Talents are this way. Whether it be a musical instrument, the stroke of an artist's paintbrush, the poke of a horse trainer's prod. Talents used will develop even more. Talents unused will go away and be lost. Jesus starts our lesson this morning in verse 34 by saying, if any want to be my followers. Being a follower refers to an ongoing reality of Christian life, day in, day out, 1 quarter at a time, if you will. So I ask you, our note to self, is it time to find your real self, or time to find your real self again? Is it time to upgrade yourself to be someone who invests his or her life and energy and resources beyond him or herself? To spend our lives to give our lives, to invest our lives rather than to save them, to find the real you, or to find the real you again, or to make yourself new today. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? To lose you, the real you. Amen.